I found myself wanting to come to your defense, but I try to not pick fights online.
The haters are always the loudest, right? You can have 90% of the people are there cheering for you and supporting you, and then the 10% that are being obnoxious and trying to discredit you, they're going to make their voice heard one way or the other. My preference is to just lean into it. And for us, that's a good thing, because the more people I can get in front of, the more successful we are with the awareness piece and the fundraising.
You mentioned the mental health component. How long do you feel like that you were on the ship before you started to realize there was an emotional tax to this?
You know, doing like 13, 14 drinks in like a 3-hour period, I've learned that that's like not normal. People are so shocked by it. Like, no, that's not normal at all. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, yes, it is, because I'm so used to that culture. Like, I knew I was not happy. I knew that I was dealing with issues, but I had no idea to like what degree, because the alcohol would mask a lot of it.
Welcome to More to Say. I'm Amber Vinsbox, founder of the $2 billion creator commerce platform, LTK. I've spent the last 14 years pioneering the creator economy, and on this podcast, I'm giving you direct access to the knowledge and perspectives of some of today's most influential people. I want you to stay ahead of the curve, so pull up a seat because we are just getting started.
I'm really excited to share this conversation that I had with Paul Johnson. Paul is a naval officer, he's an ultramarathon runner, and he most recently did a transcontinental journey from LA to New York where he ran over 3,000 miles. He set out to do this to raise awareness around mental health of veterans and those in the military. And he did this in partnership with a charity called Team Red, White, and Blue. This is something that's really near and dear to Paul's heart, which you'll hear on the episode today. He did this in a record amount of time. He did this transcontinental in 51 days and 3 hours. He's an incredibly impressive person. Part of why I was interested in having Paul on the podcast is because he did something that people dream about, which is start their journey as a creator today in 2024. Paul started with, the typical followers of a normal person on social media, and then has now grown to hundreds of thousands of followers and built a community around something that he's passionate about. Paul has built a team. He continues to do things that draw attention to him and his craft. You're going to hear everything today, from what it was like to be in the military, to how he built a team to actually launch this creator business, to how he's monetizing and how he's thinking about keeping his community engaged. So without further ado, here is Paul Johnson. Paul, welcome to More to Say.
Thanks for having me.
You just ran 3,000 miles from LA to New York, transcontinental. What made you wake up one day and decide that you were going to run across the entire country?
The joke is that I was bored and needed something to do. I first realized that was even possible to do when Pete Kostelnik, who's the current world record holder, actually ran through State College, PA, when I was at Penn State back in 2017 as he was setting his record. And then I kind of forgot about it, and I wasn't super into running like I am now. And about 2 years ago, when I was starting to get into the running and really enjoying it, it kind of came back. I was like, oh, that's still a thing. Like, that would be cool to do.
He still holds the record?
He still holds the record. That record's going to stand for a long time. Before him, the record stood for like 30 years. So he's had it for about 7 now.
What is the record?
Currently, it's 42 days, 6 hours, and 30 minutes.
Okay, and what'd you do it in?
51 days, 3 hours. So he's got a pretty significant hold on it.
How long did it take you to plan to do this? I imagine there was just not only the mental prep, but the physical prep. How did this all come together?
Yeah, the first part of it is you have to be able to run that far, just day in and day out. And so I really started with running every day starting in 2023 when I moved to Newport, Rhode Island. And I started doing the 100-mile week, starting to do the 100-mile races. And that was, I guess, a baseline for building up the aerobic endurance and everything, but the targeted training didn't start till November, about 4 months prior. And from there, it was just day in, day out, doing about 150-mile up to 200-mile weeks every single week, leading straight into the beginning of the run.
Do that math for us. How many miles are you running a day?
Anywhere from about 10 to 40 a day is what I was doing.
So how long does that take you?
A long time. Like I would do the weekends, I would do like straight through 30 and 40 miles. But Tuesday, Thursdays, I would also do 40 miles. So I would do 20 in the morning before work, go to the gym, go to work, and then as soon as I get home, I would do another 20, and then everything else, like living a normal life, trying grocery shopping, chores, whatever.
So multiple hours in the morning, multiple hours in the evening. I'm like multiplying the pain I have felt through my husband Baxter, who has been training for a race, and I had no idea that this was. I'm calling it a team sport because
Yeah, it is.
Like the whole family is involved in this like new sacrifice, right? Of like, oh, all of a sudden there's this discretionary time where we used to have him and we don't anymore. And so I'm just imagining all these hours if you're running 40 hours a day. Is this something that like you're thinking about like all day during the day and like planning for the next batch or like kind of obsessing over it? Or is it just like you're able to block it off in your mind?
It's a bit of the obsession of there's only 24 hours in a day, and I know I've got to spend X amount of time running and going to work and eventually sleeping at some point. So like those are sort of the non-negotiables, and it's like it became where I have to wake up at 3 in the morning every day so that I can run by 3:30, so that I can get my miles done. Because I know like my hard time is I have to be at work by 8 a.m. So it's like, what can I accomplish between waking up and going to work? Now, on the back end of that, let's say work is done at 4 p.m. now, I have this amount of time to do everything else that I have to do, or more running, chores, planning for the Transcon, eating dinner, social media content, all that stuff has to fit into after work. And then I also know I need to sleep at some point. So it very much became almost a necessity to like really plan those things out like the day before it happens on how I'm going to accomplish everything.
Did you start knowing that like going from like 0 to I'm going to run a transcontinental, or was this like for a certain race, or like I'm going to become an ultramarathoner and so I'm going to like work up, or was it always like the big goal from day one?
It was the big goal from day one. I knew I wanted to do it, but in my mind, a year and a half, 2 years ago, like the thought was, there's no way I could even run like a marathon every day type of thing. It's hard to wrap your mind around to fathom. And then one of my good friends, Andy Glaze, he's been in the ultra running world for a while now. He's big on like TikTok and Instagram. And he's been doing 100 miles a week for over 4 years now with no break, 100 miles a week. And I ran with him when I was in San Diego for a bit, and I was telling him how I thought it was interesting. I thought about getting into it, but I don't know if I can run 100 miles. And he just kind of looked at me. He's like, you can do it. Just sign up. You can do it. And that kind of started the whole thing. It was like, oh, well, if I just give myself some accountability and sign up, I guess I have to do it. And that was really kind of the turning point. Was my first race was in April of 2023, at the end of April. So I went from running my first 100 end of April to finishing a Transcon, which many would consider like the pinnacle of like the level of ultra running, all within a rookie year, 1 week before I hit my 1 year mark of ultra running. So it's just like, to make that transition was such a wild and foreign concept.
Do you feel, this is gonna be a crazy question, but like, do you feel like you have like a superhuman extra like power that other people maybe don't have? Like, this sounds so weird to say, but like, are you special in some way? And I mean that genuinely, because I can't fathom in 1 year going from the first race to 3,000 miles. And so it's a real question.
I don't know if it's a superpower, but I know that like I don't need as much sleep as most people. Part of that is I think I'm just used to not getting it a lot with the Navy. And then I think there's the other part of I'm just used to it, or I just physically don't need as much, because like I only average about the past year about 3.5 to 5 hours a night, even when I wasn't training for the Transcon. And some of that is like the time in the day. Some of it is I just don't sleep well. And so I think some of that helps with like the ultra side, because you're doing these long endurance events, and I know how to deal with being tired. And there you get to a point where like, are you tired or like, do you need to sleep right now? And I think that's a fine line to walk, but I think that's enabled me to be successful early on in like the ultra running career, but I don't know if I would call it a superpower.
What has this done for you socially in your training? Because I'm just imagining, so your whole morning is blocked, your whole evening is blocked.
Yeah.
I'd imagine there's not like a glass of wine happening in there in the middle, or maybe there is. I don't know.
No, it's I think to do something to the level that we did it, like you have to be okay with being by yourself, because nobody's getting up and running with me in the morning. I would see people at the gym, so there's kind of like that social interaction, but for the most part, I'm doing my own thing. Like the social interaction would just be at work with my coworkers. And then as soon as that's gone, it's like the switch is flipped. I get home, throw my shoes on, and go running again for 3 hours. So there's no social part of that. Twice a week we would have a running club, and that would be, spend 3 or 5 miles hanging out with other people running, and then I'd be running before, go hang out with them. As soon as we're done, I keep going to run while they're hanging out at the bar afterwards. So there's very much so that limit of the social side where you're just spending a lot of time by yourself.
What did you think about or listen to over all these hours every day when you're by yourself?
I'm not big on podcasts. I do a lot of music. I had like a 30-hour country playlist that I played a lot during my training, or I'll get hooked on a song or an artist and I'll just loop that thing for hours on end. That's what I was doing definitely towards the end of the Transcon. I need something new because I've been listening to the same thing, and I'll listen to a new song or a new artist and just keep looping them for a day straight, and then I'll switch to a new artist the next day.
Okay, logistically, talk me through preparing for the race.
The crew was probably the toughest part, because like you can do a Transcon by yourself. Plenty of people have done it. But to be able to cover the distance that we covered, you need to have a team supporting you. But that's also a massive ask and commitment for them to pull them away from their lives for a month and a half, 2 months. And that's definitely the hardest part is, who can come and do that? Also, are those people going to work well together? And that was the biggest issue, because I had probably about 5 people lined up on the crew. And then my main person found out 2 weeks before that, because he's in the Marine Corps, that they were changing his orders and they're canceling all his leave and vacation days, and he can't go anymore. And so it's like 2 weeks before, what do you do now? And so that's where I found like Rob, my crew chief, and Mike, one of the crew members, is 2 weeks before, hey, do you want to come out and run with me because someone connected me with you? And he ends up being my crew chief and absolutely crushing it. So that's the personnel side is one major issue. And then you've got vehicles, you've got food, fuel, the media side. I mean, there's so many components that just play into it. It was more of a relief to start running because everything became the crew's problem now, and I just had to worry about the running portion.
What do you wish that you would have planned differently now looking back?
Heat training would probably have been a good idea. Deserts are hot. I live in the Northeast, so there was no weather that we experienced that was anything worse than a winter in New England, except for like the desert heat and sandstorms. So that was definitely one of our downfalls, was the heat. That's okay. We eventually got a little bit better at it, but the heat training, I think, is something that would have changed. Other than that, pretty happy with how it turned out. I mean, we dealt with what we had. You can't plan for everything, so really happy with overall how it went.
Okay, who all was on this team? Like, who's traveling with you? How many cars are there? What does this look like?
So there's 2 vehicles. There's an RV, and then we had like a camper van as well. So the RV is kind of where the crew slept and existed most of the time, and then the van was like the main support vehicle. That's where I slept at night. The RV would go and do chores or whatever, the campsite for the night, while the van was traveling with me throughout the day. And then the crew was, Rob is my crew chief. Mindo was supposed to be my original crew chief, but he's got pulled with the Marine Corps, so he came for like the back half. We started, also my mom was there full time, and then we had some members that we had to swap out for different reasons. So started with a guy named Griffin. He was with us for about a week. Also Becca, she was with us for about a week as well before she had to head out for some stuff. So then we were down crew members, and eventually Mike came and joined us, who I literally met on day 8. He just showed up because Rob had him come out, and he became a massive asset throughout the rest of the run.
Did you have like a doctor in this crew? Like, who are these people?
Mike was our doctor, YouTube educated.
YouTube educated.
Yeah, we called him Dr. Magic Mike because he gave me a foot massage for like 20 minutes every night, and I think that was our secret weapon. So, and when I had PT issues, he just searched on YouTube, found something, and tried it, and so he was my doctor.
Okay, what do the injuries look like? Like, I can't imagine the amount of pain that you're going through over a 2-month period. Are you like mainly talking about leg, or were like there are other injuries happening?
It's mostly legs. I mean, the body's just overall so exhausted. Like, there's really no cardiovascular issues because like we're operating in that zone 1, zone 2, very low effort, low heart rate. Like for me, doing that running is like most people going for a walk around the block. That's like the level of effort that we're putting into it. So it's very low stress on like the cardiovascular system, but obviously the muscles and the legs are working a lot. So really the only injuries were like with my legs. My right calf and right ankle were having a lot of issues in the beginning, probably for the first 2.5 weeks. I've had an ongoing issue with my right knee from like a motorcycle crash a couple years ago. That wasn't too bad. It was more so it would just bother me every once in a while. But nothing that was long lasting. We're pretty sure I have like a hernia in my abdomen or something because anytime I like try to cough, I was like dying and couldn't cough. So we'll get that figured out eventually. But nothing long term, it doesn't seem like.
So one of the reasons I've been so excited to have you on More to Say is because you are so new to this industry. And so many people have said for years now, I would say even for over a decade, that, oh, it's so saturated. Like it's too late to break in. And then we saw you launch a journey, grow to hundreds of thousands of followers. And so can you tell us a little bit about, okay, we've gone through the running side of this, but like what's the media side of this? Like what's the plan? Who made it? What does it look like? Who's on your team?
Yeah, so I think the important part of that is like there was no media team before this. Like it was just me posting videos on mostly just Instagram. And like there was no budget, there was no anything. It was just, hey, this seems like fun. Let me start posting videos of me running or me doing these races along that running and ultra content. And it just sort of started taking off from there. I mean, well, I would consider a pretty fast growth rate because within a year of me starting, I was already over like 100,000 followers, and I have no frame of reference, but people were like, "Oh, that's really good." And then the plan for the Transcon was developing, and I think that spurred a lot of attention and a lot of growth. But the real media side was like, in my opinion, there's really no such thing as bad publicity to a degree. And when I do my races, I think what is cool about it is like posting updates while I'm running on all these races. And the Transcon is a little bit different than that because I just don't have energy and bandwidth to do those types of things, to make a post every night and have it ready by the morning like I typically do. So that's where the media team really came in is, you know, the plan is 3 posts a day with the reels or like a summary at the end of the day. And then a weekly YouTube series, and then ultimately the documentary, which will be coming out. And I think having those posts, what we found was the posts that did the best were the ones that were the most raw and like me typically talking to the camera. The ones like the higher production value ones that the media team would throw together of like me doing something did not perform as well. And I think that what that speaks to is almost the level of probably authenticity and just transparency of the content that we're putting out. And I think that is what ultimately became our strategy was go back to the roots of I just post stuff for fun of me. There's no media team, and trying to emulate that as best we can.
So the authenticity is, you think, what drove the growth?
I think so. I think that's what drove the initial growth of just my platform before the TransCon. Not worrying about, like, I just told myself, I'm going to start posting a video every single day. And that kind of became my little challenge. And the struggle with that is, like, at first I felt like, oh, I have to do all these big things to be able to share. And it's like, no, I just have to post a video of myself sharing something, or dig back into the archives of a run I did or something else that I filmed, and put my spin on it, whether it's a narration, some text, some music, whatever, and not worry so much about, well, how good does it look? The more successful was not worrying about that and just, you know what, this is me, my low budget production, and this is what works well, and it did.
I started following you when you were leading up to the TransCon, and it was like every day you had the daily countdown, like the daily sort of ticker that you did. It definitely felt like you were producing it. And the consistency is definitely key. I often talk about how, like, why is it that, for example, Kim Kardashian, like, why is she still doing reality shows? And it's because if you know about her life and you're following her, even though there's rarely anything going on in these shows, you then care when she launches a skincare line, when she launches her Skims line. And so that seems like sort of the thesis that you pulled through of, like, they just need to stay involved in the story.
It's almost like, to a level, staying relevant at a very small level, because as the more we kept sharing that story and the consistency of this many days, this is what we're doing, and reiterating that, like you said, I think that started to draw people in the closer that we got to the start of the race.
Why do you think your super fans became super fans?
Oh, I don't even know. There were some crazy super fans out there, that's for sure. I honestly, I don't know. Yeah, maybe because, like, we're just kind of sharing everything, and just having fun with it. Like, that was the number one goal I told the team when we were planning for this, was, like, it's going to suck and it's going to hurt. But at the end of the day, like, if we are not having fun, we're doing this completely wrong. Like, the best memories from the TransCon are things like Rob, my crew chief, eating an entire party-sized bag of double stuffed Oreos in 3.5 minutes. Like, every single Oreo. Like, things like that where we're just being goofy and having fun. I think that speaks volumes to just sharing your personality, just being you, which I think translates to typically people like you more when you're being yourself rather than something you're not.
So as we were following you, everyone's excited. I'm like, almost like your follower count's like a ticker. Like, it's just like growing every single day, especially at the beginning of the race. I noticed most. And it continued on through. And then I started to notice, probably, I don't know, maybe it was a weekend when I started to see this, like, you had some serious haters.
Oh, yeah.
What were they mad about?
So obviously, if you ever try to do anything incredible, which was like growing LTK or anything like that, is there are always going to be people who don't like what you're doing, and typically it stems from, like, jealousy, or they just have nothing better to do. And I think the biggest thing with the haters was, number one, they were upset that we gave up on the record on day 4. We're still out there doing 60 miles a day, but they thought that we were kind of doing, like, trying to cover our tracks by saying, hey, we're going to focus on the mental health and the fundraising portion. And because, like, day 4, we're like, we haven't posted anything about fundraising yet, and we're 4 days in, and, like, we've done nothing to raise money, and that was, like, one of those turning points where it's like, we can keep trying to push for this record, but that wasn't the whole reason we're here. And they view that as, when I say they, like, the haters, they're like, oh, you're trying to cover up your failures and switch it, be like, oh, the run was always about mental health and the fundraising. And it's like, well, it was, if you go back and look at all the posts we made since January. But also, I think people are afraid of failing at something. And I'll be the first to tell them that, yeah, we absolutely failed at the record. Like, it was a complete and utter failure. We were day 4, 10% in.
I might say utter failure. It was like, I'm going to call it a little short.
It was a big shortage.
You still achieved it. I would not consider it a failure. But so you had that category of people who are, I don't even know how to describe them. But then you had the other ones who were really angry about everything that you ate.
Everything that I ate, and how thinking that I was riding in the van for like quarter-mile intervals. And I don't know if the riding in the van is just people didn't understand how I could power hike up a hill pretty quickly when I was using poles. But the nutrition side is like, at the end of the day, I'm burning 10 to 12,000 calories a day. And so in order to do that for a month and a half, like, you have to replace those calories one way or another. And ultra running, while it's growing as a sport, is still very small in the grand scheme of things. And so when people look at it, they're like, oh, you're eating donuts, or you're eating pizza and ice cream and soda. Like, that's terrible. You're not being healthy. And it's like, well, healthy is a frame of mind. Like, people think if I eat a salad, I'm healthy. That's true to a degree, but to be healthy in ultra running, you have to replace all this energy that you're burning. And the only way to do that is to put massive amounts of calories in so that you have the energy to race the next day or to continue the run. And it's just a very simple matter of put gas in the tank so you can burn the gas. And that's what we were doing, and people didn't like that.
I found myself wanting to come to your defense, but I try to not pick fights online, so I keep things to myself.
Yeah.
But how did that make you feel personally when because the majority of people are cheering you on, but to see sort of those comments and those conversations happening in the comments, like, how did you handle that?
I mean, the haters are always the loudest, right? You can have 90% of the people are there cheering for you and supporting you, and then the 10% that are being obnoxious and trying to discredit you, they're going to make their voice heard one way or the other. My preference is to just lean into it, because, like I said in the beginning, I don't think there's too much bad publicity. It's going to generate interaction. It's going to generate views, likes, comments, shares, whatever, which drives the whole interaction portion. And for us, that's a good thing, because the more people I can get in front of, the more successful we are with the awareness piece and the fundraising. So by them interacting, I always try to edge them on. Like, if they say something stupid to me, I basically say the same thing back to them, change a few words, but just direct it at them. Or when people thought that, we're cheating with like riding in a van, I made a post about, well, they thought my heart rate data wasn't right. So I put my watch on the outside of my jacket where you're not going to get any data, and I'm still going to keep running. And people, I think, are upset by that, because they're like, well, you're just being rude about it. And you're like, that's not good. You shouldn't be doing that. It's like, but now you're still talking about it. You're still interacting. I'm okay, and I accept the fact that may bring some negative views to me, but it's ultimately going to drive you to want to interact more, which means I'm going to be able to reach a wider audience.
Taking a quick break because you guys have really been loving me sharing my very most favorite things. Today, I'm going to share a product that you've heard me talk about a ton if you follow my LTK shop. This is the Juicy Lip by Tarte. So I have this Juicy Lip stick. It's a really high gloss stick, but what I love about it is it doesn't run. It's very high shine, but it's not that kind that drips down your face. It's also pretty petite and fits in your purse. I have probably now 20 of these. I keep them restocked. They're always my go-to. I looked to see how popular these were on LTK, and the Juicy Lip is actually a most loved LTK product. Customers have bought enough of these from LTK to where if they were stacked, they could reach the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Everyone loves this product. They keep it on subscribe, and I love it as well. I can recommend for you right now the clear one, but I have almost every color, and I use this constantly. It's my consistent go-to. Thank you for your service. And I want to hear about your journey to actually becoming a naval officer.
Yeah, so I didn't really know what I wanted to do in high school. But sort of my role model at the time was one of my older cousins, and he never joined the Navy or went to the Naval Academy, but he was looking into the academy. He's 2 years ahead of me, so that sort of piqued my interest on it. My dad did Air Force ROTC for a couple years. His dad was career Army, so there's some military service in the family. But then he got me interested in the Navy, and I started exploring it, and I was like, okay, that seems like what I want to do. Go be a pilot or go be a SEAL or something along those lines. And then I applied to the Naval Academy, didn't get accepted, but I applied to Penn State, got accepted there. didn't get accepted for the ROTC program, so now I'm just participating as a civilian member in the program with no scholarship and no guarantee that I'll actually commission at the end. And then like 3 months into my freshman year, I had reapplied that last summer and found out that I got accepted into the program now. So I just continued on that for the next 4 years. Commissioned, ended up going in as a surface warfare officer on the ships, and then spent 3 years in Spain, forward deployed on a ship out there, a year and a half on a ship in San Diego, and then ultimately a little over a year and a half now, where I'm at in Newport teaching at a schoolhouse for this tour.
What was that like? The majority of your time seems like it's been abroad to date. What has your time been like abroad and then now domestically?
When we pick our first ships, you get a very big long list, and it's like the only time you really get a choice in the Navy is it's like, where do you want to go for your first assignment? And this is what's available. Everybody across the country is ranked, and you get to pick an order. And once something's gone, it's off the slate. You can pick something else. And Rota, Spain, is typically, Rota and Japan go very quickly because they're overseas stations. And I remember I was like, I was frustrated with being selected for surface warfare versus explosive ordnance disposal, which is what I wanted to do. And I was just like, well, I'm gonna do my time and get out. I'm just gonna go to Norfolk or something. And one of my instructors, there was the one female lieutenant. She pulled me aside right before she called me an idiot. She's like, you should go to Spain. And then Mindo, who was actually on the Transcon with me, he was one of my instructors at Penn State. And he was as a gunnery sergeant, like our drill instructor. And he pulled me aside literally before I went into the room. He said, I heard you're thinking of going to Norfolk. I'm like, yeah. He's like, you're a moron. You should go to Spain. You have the you're high enough on the ranking. You should go to Spain. And I kind of thought about that. I went in and I was like, they're probably right. So I ended up at Spain, and then it seems like this very awesome thing to live overseas, but the operational tempo of those forward deployed ships is just off the charts. It's supposed to be like 4 months at sea, 4 months in port, but you spend more time at sea than you do in port. And when you are in port, like at home in Rota, it's 12 plus hour work days is what it ends up turning into, plus you're working weekends. And so it's just this massive workload and massive volume of stress that's actually like a very difficult place and time to be, especially because as new officers, we're going through our whole qualification process, which is an additional workload that you may not have to deal with. So it's actually like a very stressful and tough place to be. So while you do get to live in this really cool place and see all these amazing cities on the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, it's very tough, like on the like the mental health side of things across, myself, peers, all of our sailors. It's just a very stressful job to be in.
And how old were you at this point?
That was a month after graduating college, so 22, I think.
And just out of my naivety, what does a day look like when you're out at sea?
Out at sea, it would depend on the watch sections. So for example, I was in 4-section standing watch on the bridge. So I would be up on the bridge, basically the quote unquote captain for that 4-hour period that I was on watch, driving the ship, getting where we need to go, making sure the ship's running on schedule, like internally. And I was on most of the time what's called the 12 to 3. So from noon to 3 p.m., I'm on watch on the bridge. And from noon to 3 p.m., and then from midnight to 3 a.m., I was also on watch. So you worked 2 cycles a day. So for me, I would basically wake up at 11 p.m., go on watch from 12 to 3, and then 3 a.m., I would get off watch. I would usually go start my laundry and then go to the gym for an hour or so. And then be done with the gym. I would get some work done before breakfast. Breakfast would start at 6 a.m. And then I'd go back to bed at 6:30 so I could wake up at 8:30 to start the day with everybody else. And then I would work till about 11, so from like 9 to 11, and then lunch, go back on watch 12 to 3, try to get some more work done from like 3 to 5 till dinner, and then eat dinner and immediately go to bed so I can wake up at 11 to go back on watch. So it's just like this endless cycle of like watch, eat, sleep, watch, eat, sleep, and then you try to sprinkle the work in wherever you can.
You mentioned the mental health component. How long do you feel like that you were on the ship before you started to realize there was an emotional tax to this?
I don't think you realize it so much in the beginning, right? Because, I mean, alcohol and like tobacco are known massive coping mechanisms for military members, particularly in the Navy. Like, you hear the, drink like a sailor type of thing. And that's absolutely what we like. If we're not at work, like we were just getting drunk at home or out in town, doing like 13, 14 drinks in like a 3-hour period, which I've learned that that's like not normal. Because when I would talk about that to people, I'd be like, oh yeah, like that's what we did. And people are so shocked by it. Like, no, that's not normal at all. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, yes, it is, because I'm so used to that culture. And the way I describe it is like that was masking, like I knew I was not happy. I knew that I was dealing with issues, but I had no idea to like what degree, because the alcohol would mask a lot of it. And it really wasn't until I got to San Diego and I got into the running like a marathon with one of my friends. And I'm like, okay, I can't drink as much because then I can't go and do the long run the next morning, which I promised him I would do all this stuff with him. And as the alcohol use started to decline, a lot of these, symptoms that had been masked by it started like coming to light. So I wouldn't say it was so much on the ship that, when did I realize? It was more so in San Diego where I started to kind of see that coming through.
Well, so at what point did you connect running with Team RWB, and then tell us about Team RWB?
Yeah, that was probably about a year ago, because I was in Newport and I was doing the running, and I know I'm going to do the Transcon next March. I know I'm like 9 months out from that. And I knew that I wanted it to be in some capacity connected to mental health. And my running coach, he's actually the Navy marathon team coach as well. He's a prior active, he's a reservist now. He had told me about Team RWB because he used to do some stuff with them back in the day when he was doing a lot more racing. So he connected me with, hey, here's who you should reach out to. Kind of got that started going, and it was more so like doing like an ambassadorship with them. And then I eventually pitched the idea to them, like, hey, this is what I wanted. Well, I initially pitched it to them, and they're like, kind of blew me off type of thing. And then as I was an ambassador with them and kind of established some credibility with them, I brought it up again, and they were all about it. So that was sort of the connection there. And Team RWB, Team Red, White, and Blue, they're the nation's leading like veteran health and wellness group, charity, community, however you want to describe it. 200,000 members active nationwide, and it's not just veterans and service members. Like, there's a large active component like myself, a lot of civilians working it as well. And the whole idea is the relationship between mental and physical health, which is exactly what I discovered myself. Was the more that I run, the better I feel on the mental side. If I go to the gym, I feel a lot better. If I go for a run, I feel a lot better. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, whether or not they've consciously made that connection within themselves. Is they typically feel better after they've done some sort of physical activity. And that's really Team RWB's goal, is to, number one, reduce those feelings of isolation that a lot of veterans feel leaving the military, because it's from this tight-knit group, and now all of a sudden you don't have that. It's just you and nothing else. So you spend 24 hours a day with these people, and now you don't. And providing events, programming, community activation, in getting members to come do these group activities, like it's going for a run, going for a ruck, doing all sorts of fitness challenges throughout the year, typically related to like military or military history, to keep people active and engaged and work on both that mental and physical health.
And you wanted to raise how much for them?
$1 million.
Okay, so how's it going?
We're getting there. We're like just shy of 600,000. So, the goal was 1 million by the time we got to New York. I think we hit 500,000 at New York, and then in the time after, about close to an additional 100,000. So the goal is still to reach the 1 million by the end of the year, and there's some mechanisms for that, like the documentary that we're working on that we're looking to use as a massive fundraising push for that.
I want to come back to the documentary with New York. So
Yeah.
that was the end of your race. And then you announced that they were going to be closing down streets, bridges. Tell me about how all that came together and what it felt like getting to that finish line.
The planning for that was very interesting because, we had the idea of like, if we get enough people, we can just run down the street and cars can't run us over. Like, we'll just shut it down with the number of people we're running with. And the more we thought about it, we're like, someone's going to get hurt. That's not a good idea. And it's like, well, we've had all these police escorts through a bunch of these, smaller towns and cities. Like, is there any way we can do that? It's like, no way that NYPD is going to shut down like parts of New York and escort us. Like, it's not feasible for them. And then it turns out that somebody because we're talking with Team RWB, I'm like, hey, this is what we want to do, but like, I don't know how we're going to get the police to agree to that. And one of the members in Team RWB is a part of NYPD. And he's a part of NYPD's running club. And so they were actually NYPD running club was actually planning an event that day already where they're going to be running somewhere. And they basically said, cancel that. All the members show up to run with us instead. And since they've had their people out there and I think what we're running for meant a lot for emergency services, fire, police, EMS, military. It meant a lot to them. And so like the deputy commissioner, she comes out and she's like, this is what we're doing. We're air support. You're going to have motorcycles, mopeds. Didn't know NYPD had mopeds, and like cruisers and stuff. And they're like, we're going to change your route a little bit just because of logistics and traffic flow, but we're going to shut down the entire street and escort you all the way from George Washington Bridge to Times Square. And so like that happened in like a 24-hour period, like overnight. They said, hey, we're going to do this. And we were like 5 days out from reaching there. And so it's in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like the police are going to come out and support. And I didn't really realize to what degree that was going to be until we got to starting our last 9 miles from the George Washington Bridge. And they literally have like 10 motorcycles and 20 mopeds, like shutting down every single street. Like we didn't see a single car in New York City from the time we entered to the time we reached Times Square, because they gridlocked the entire city leading into it. And like the deputy commissioner, she's up there running with us the whole way, NYPD running clubs with us. And it's just to see them spend that much time, energy, and assets to me, it's like, it's such a trivial thing for them. It's just, a couple people running through the city, but it meant so much more to us and to them. So to see them out there was just like mind-boggling and hard to process.
Gosh, so many thoughts about this. One, LTK was a sponsor of your run, and then Baxter and I personally have been sponsors of RWB. And so we followed along very, very closely along the whole way. I have to imagine running into that. I know that I would be choking back tears, seeing all of that, kind of just the coverage from the force. And then I'm also thinking about you early days, like not even being accepted into these programs that you wanted to be, that would set you up for success to be able to join the military, to then go on for these programs. And it's just like consistently, like pushing through, and then to like having such massive success in that moment. Were you choked up? Like what emotionally, like what did you do?
Yeah. I think people expected me to be a lot more emotional about it than I was. Like if you look at the finish line with the people there, obviously the run meant a lot to me and to the crew, but I think what's worth noting is how much it meant to everyone else that was supporting us. Like people I'd never met before who came and ran with us were like in tears because they were so happy that we accomplished what we set out to do and the reason that we did it. I wasn't too emotional about like the New York City finish. To me, it was more like oh, thank God we're done type of thing, right? Like I can go to the hotel room and not wake up tomorrow till like noon, and that's gonna be fine. Like the emotional part for me was like some of the snippets out in the places we were running where people were coming to run with us and like sharing their stories with us about, mental health. There was like the crew wasn't there for this one, but there was a guy in Ohio who you could tell that based off like the style and type of tattoos on him and his hands, and like he was some sort of military veteran. And all he did was he stopped me on the side of the road, and I like trying to introduce himself. So I like went to give him a handshake or whatever, and he just pulled me in for a hug. And all he said was, "You saved my life today." And it's like, that was all I couldn't get anything else out of him. It's just like he smells of alcohol, and it's just like, all he said was, "You saved my life today." And it's like you leave that in the moment, and you're like, oh my God, like what is going on? And then you like, we have to keep running. And so thinking about and reflecting on like those types of moments where like you just like start tearing up and trying to process like what is going on, what is the impact that we're having here, because you can't see it. Like I can see likes, views, whatever, I can see that through social media, but at the end of the day it doesn't really mean anything. So to have those tangible interactions with people like that, I mean, that's not the only interaction out there, is like that is the emotional part for me, and seeing just how much of an impact we're having. Whereas like New York City to me was like, okay, we finished this, like what are we supposed to do now? And so it wasn't quite as an emotional of an event for me.
It's a lot to even manage. I'm sure you're still processing now that you've finished and all the things that you've experienced, and I'm sure there's still stories to come. And part of what you mentioned earlier was how fun was so important to you guys, and we definitely saw that joyfulness throughout the entire experience. And still today, like some of the funny moments I loved were April Fools. I actually thought that you were quitting the race, even though it was April Fools.
I was amazed at how many people actually fell for it.
So if you guys didn't see it, Paul's like sitting in the van. He's been having a tough time. He's already been sharing his injuries like over the course of this, and looks very run down and sunburnt. I was really nervous about your sunburn.
A lot of people were.
I was the one commenting like, please wear sunscreen. But you're sitting there leaning over, and you kind of go through this whole thing, and then you're like, so we're gonna have to stop the Transcon, and then you're like, psych, and then run out of the van
and ate some
like,
Gushers.
and eating Gushers and pissing everybody off. I think almost every like major road sign you came to, you were twerking in the road.
Oh yeah, every new state line we had to have a twerk dance for it. That was the goal.
There were crop tops.
Yep.
There were duck shorts.
Yep.
The whole team in duck shorts. So I really believe that, there were so many reasons to be following you along in this journey, whether you connected with, the mental health side of this, the obviously the veteran piece of it, like the humor, the joyfulness, on the Today Show, we're like watching you come out and, actually on my team, they're like, he's wearing Birkenstocks on the Today Show.
Al Roker was a fan of the bird. He couldn't stop asking me about my toes.
Oh, wait, no, my favorite was Al Roker asking you about toe lube.
Yeah. Well, because we were talking before, they're like, how is the chat? I'm like, you just use a lot of lube, and like the armpits, the nipples, the groin, like the toes, everything's fine. And he just could not get off that topic the whole time.
The LTK team has been super busy, and I want to share one of the latest products that we will be launching just this week. You've probably already seen it in testing across social media. So this is called LTK DM. You've seen me using it in testing, where I tell you if you comment shop that I'll actually DM you a link to the exact post that you see. We've had a couple hundred creators in testing, and now we're rolling out to the entire network. So these creators will let you know if this feature is enabled on their post by letting you comment shop. You get that post immediately. Getting you from discovery to doorstep is one of our biggest priorities, and it has been for so long. So I want to actually reflect back in 2013, I believe it was, we launched what was known as LIKEtoKNOW.it. So this was actually a service where you as a shopper could sign up for it, and every time you hit like on an Instagram post by one of our creators, we would actually email you the post with all the ready to shop information. That changed in 2017 when we rolled out our screenshot technology, which by the way still does work, where if you have the LTK app, you can take a screenshot of a creator's content, and if it's in the app, we'll send you a push notification where you can shop that post immediately, or we'll save it for you in the app under your saved post so that you can go in and shop it later. Now, our newest expansion of this sort of speed from discovery to doorstep is letting you get these DMs immediately on social media. So creators will tell you if their post in feed or if their reel is enabled by LTK DM. I hope you love this product. We're seeing that people are finding so much more from it that they love, instead of having to wait and remember to go back to a creator's LTK shop. So be sure to check it out. I think you'll be really pleased with the new tech. So Al was stuck on that. It was fun too to go back through your LTK and see what people were going through, clicking on, searching. So I asked the team to pull some of the stats from this.
Yeah.
And so you joined LTK at the end of February, preparing for your run.
Yep.
You actually posted pretty much daily since that point. This is a fun one. You actually drove a click to Hoka, who was one of your partners.
Yep.
And then of course you were tagging on your LTK because you were wearing them every day. You drove a click to the Hoka site for every single mile that you ran across the US.
Wow.
Pretty fun to see. You actually drove traffic to 25 unique brands, which I'm trying to count, like, okay, what were all the things that were on your body to all of these different brands?
I'm like, I didn't know I was wearing 25 brands.
I know, kind of interesting to see that hit. Of course, the fan favorites were Gorewear and Hoka.
Yeah.
Which was cool to see because obviously they sponsored you as well. And so that sponsorship obviously where people are really engaged with that. Your top selling products were the Hoka Performance hat, the Hoka Adventure hat, the Hoka Clifton 9 GTX running shoe. Why did you and your team do that, share that? And then why do you think that those products were the ones that people gravitated towards?
You mean like why posting, why sharing, all of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, it became much more massive of a tool than I realized because even before the Transcon, people are naturally drawn to be like, okay, what are you wearing? What is the gear that you're using? I think it's a little bit more special in like the athletic community because there's so much you can do with that, and like there's so many different types of gear and how people use it. And so it honestly was like a hassle being like trying to answer questions where it's like, this is the shoe, or this is the headlamp, or this is the hat. Whereas like it was so much easier and efficient for both, myself and the viewers to be like, hey, just go to, as cliche as it sounds, go to the link in the bio, go to the LTK site, because it's all listed out and like what it is and where to find it. And it just makes things, just the workflow so much easier for both parties. And I think when you look at something like, what did the best, like the hats and stuff, they're so practical. Like every single day I am wearing a hat, whether it's for sun, rain, whatever. It's a very simple product that most people use, and it's one of the main tools for the running, other than like shoes, which were also a big hit. So I think being able to make that very accessible to people is why they performed well.
What are some of your favorite products right now?
Oof. The rain jacket, the Gorewear. They're going to hate me because I can't name it right now. But like,
it's on your LTK.
Yeah, go to the link in bio, LTK. That jacket was incredible. I wore it every single day. It worked in all the... I was wearing that jacket with nothing but a t-shirt on underneath in like...
A nipple loop.
Well, I would tape the nipples. Less chafing that way. But that jacket in like freezing rain and snow and nothing but a t-shirt underneath, and I was like overheating. Like it was so warm. That, as well as I think the Hoka bucket hat, the adventure hat, was like, absolutely love that thing. I've got 3 of them at home right now.
To me, it's such a fun hat because it just, I don't know, it just reminds me of y'all's team. It's like so joyful. But
it's so practical.
Yes. What advice would you give to the creator community? You've done lots of things that a lot of people admire and aspire to, but on the creator side, growing from being a new creator to now hundreds of thousands and having these brand deals and growing your LTK community and being in a really kind of a newer space for this community specifically, like what advice would you give to someone who's either established or even who wants to start out?
I think number one is like that authenticity that we talked about. Like I was thinking about it when I was running around LA earlier today, and whenever I come to LA, I always get the sense, I think it's California in general, I get this sense of like there's a lot of people who try to be something that they may not actually be, where I don't get that feeling as much on like the East Coast. And I think that is such an interesting to just be able to feel that. Whereas when somebody views content, people know when I'm posting something that's me or when I'm posting something that's part of a brand deal. Like you just automatically know. And so I think that authenticity, just being you on social media and letting that process grow, I think is like the number one thing. And I think the other part is just setting massive goals and accepting the fact that you are going to fail, but that is how you get better at something. Just like with the Transcon, we knew that we were going to fail 99% sure at getting the record, and we did fail, but like that set us up for so much more massive success with the fundraising. That did I actually think we were going to reach $1 million? No, but I didn't think we were going to reach $500,000 either. So to reach 600,000 is like, we set these such massive lofty goals knowing that we're probably going to fail, and then therefore we're able to reach heights that we weren't even anticipating.
Pulling this back through to business, when Baxter and I dream of things, whether it's products or events or even like down to like, the gifting for this conference that we're having now, LTK Active in LA, I always start with, I call it like the rainbows and unicorns version, which is like all things perfect, anything in the world is possible. Like, this is what I want this experience to be like. And then let's just figure out what is possible within that or what we have to subtract out. But then you're aiming so much higher. And it's sort of that old saying of like, like aim for the moon and you'll land in space or something.
Yeah.
There's a better way to say that.
Land among the stars.
Yeah, there you go. There's a cute way to say it. But I think that that's true for anyone listening, no matter whether you want to do this personally or professionally, like whatever your goal is just go to that rainbows and unicorns thinking. And I think you end up being more successful. I want to end with a documentary.
Yes.
So you guys have done so much work documenting this entire thing. And now this is going to be the last stretch to hopefully hit that 1 million, which I do believe that you will, especially with listeners here. We'll point you back to Paul's site so that you can actually go donate. But tell us a little bit about the documentary and the plan for it.
Yeah. So, with the Transcon, like we talked about, we did a massive push with the social media side. Posting multiple times a day. We did a weekly YouTube series, but all of that is still only like 10% of what actually happened on the Transcon. And we did that purposely because we knew that we were going to be putting out this documentary and we didn't want to give away everything. So, that documentary is going to go very in depth with a lot of like the crew interviews and what they're thinking at different times throughout, like both in the moment, but then also after the run as they're reflecting on it, and just some of the crazy things that were happening in terms of like having no water or electricity on the RV for about 75% of the run. Stuff like that, and being able to share that and share some of those unique moments, like, the example of the guy in Ohio who just came up and hugged me out of nowhere. Other situations like that we're able to get on camera, and just share the whole process and what the Transcon meant to us, but also the rest of the country. That's going to be coming out sometime later in the fall here. The goal is we'll do a couple screenings with that in New York and LA, really pushing all the proceeds from that going directly to the donation pile to hit that $1 million, and then ultimately get it released out to the public for viewing from there.
Well, we're excited to watch. We'll be following along with you. And for all of you listening, you can follow Paul on...
we're on Instagram at Powie Johnson, because, when we used to have capital letters on Instagram, so Pauy Johnson, and then we're building up the YouTube as well, same username.
And your LTK the same?
LTK is the same as well, I believe, yes.
And your website?
pauljohnson.run.
And that's the real Paul
That's
Johnson.
The real Paul. Not the real Slim Shady, but the real Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Amber, today it was such a great episode with Paul, and to hear more about his story And I know Baxter has recently gotten into running. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired that? What was it like in your house? I know it can be quite the undertaking, so would love to hear.
It was more of an undertaking than I expected, to be honest. I've never been a runner. I don't think Baxter has necessarily either. Like, he ran track in high school, but such a different stage of life. So his friend was encouraging him to join a charity that was running in the New York Marathon and had pushed him candidly for years to do it. And he finally decided that it would give him a reason to train. And as he started training, he really fell in love with it. And then he was pretty successful for his first race, finishing the New York Marathon, and decided that he was going to kind of continue this lifestyle and keep running. I use lifestyle very seriously because training for a race, he spends at least 30 minutes stretching before he runs, and then he's spending hours actually running. And then icing and taking care of himself. He's changed his eating habits. All of those things have resulted in a incredible transformation of his kind of just his body. Like, you can look at him and just see how he's become a totally different person, and he looks just much healthier. And in result, candidly, it's rubbed off on our family and the things that we're eating. Like, he's making us smoothies and other healthy snacks. And so that's just kind of become a part of what's normal, which I totally love. I will say it was shocking at first to have that much time per day that maybe I used to have access to him to not have access to him. And so it took some getting used to, but his journey, I think it's, my kids are starting to follow it. We've told them that if they will train for a 3K, there's one in our hometown. And then if they do that one, that they can travel with us to Colorado and do the next one. And so I'm really excited about the way that it's influencing the activity level in our family.
That's so sweet. I love that. And we totally dove into LTK Active. I mean, the event just happened. Tell us a little bit about how that was in person, what it was like meeting with all of those amazing brands and creators.
For so many years, we've worked with active brands on the platform. And over the years, we've noticed it just becoming more and more popular. So really, since the pandemic, it has actually become the fastest growing category on LTK. And I think about all of us sitting around in the realities of our lives. Maybe you picked up pickleball, which is actually really common culturally, or maybe it was tennis, or you found some other way to get healthy and be active. And so it's trending culturally on a global scale, but also when we look at Gen Z, it's really integrated into their DNA. They're much more aware of kind of their health and nutrition. They're much more proactive on their activity levels. They lead a much more balanced life, and it's really part of who they are. And so whether it's getting dressed or choosing products, it's a really important piece of kind of that generation. And also they're the generation that the vast majority of them, and I'm talking vast majority is like north of 80%, close to 90%, already shop from creators. They trust creators more than family members. This is a generation that grew up understanding I have a creator guide that I trust and that can lead me. And they're leading each other in that way. And so it's no wonder that it's become that fast growing category on our platform. It's grown so much that it deserved its own conference. So for the very first time, we had LTK Active conference in Los Angeles, a full day with brands and with creators. Of course, have to end with a rooftop party. We had a great run actually with Paul, who led it. And led that meetup. And I'm really excited for this category personally. If you listen to the Skinny Confidential podcast a couple of weeks ago, Lauren talked about the first time that we met in person. So funny story for you. 2015, Lauren was invited to the LTK conference. And when she came, she asked for an interview. She had a book that she had just released. She, of course, had her blog at the time. She was really focused on health and nutrition. She was from San Diego. We sat down and talked about my fashion preferences and all about LTK and the business. And to wrap it up, she wanted to know my health tips. And with a straight face, I said to her, I've started drinking Diet Dr. Pepper. I had no idea how cringe that was until now when she brought it back up to me. Because at the time I was dead serious. I was like, I just found out that like I can drink way less calories by switching to diet. How wonderful of a tip is that I'm sharing with you and your readership. It had never been a part of my life. I thought that I knew about nutrition. I thought that I was interested in nutrition, but it's really only become in the last year, both through watching Baxter's journey and then candidly doing some blood tests and learning more about my body and like what I need and what I'm lacking, that I've gotten more interested in it. So this is a passion point for both Baxter and I, but it's also just something that the network has demanded.
And let's get a little personal. I want to know about what's trending with you in Active. I saw recently on your LTK, you had these really cute sneakers. I know you just went on a getaway with Baxter, which is really nice, and we'd love to hear the details. But let's talk active. What brands are you loving? What trends are you loving in the active vertical right now?
You know, I like everyone probably like have a drawer of my like quote active items. And I was sharing on stage at LTK Active that historically that has meant I have a pair of leggings, like workout yoga leggings, like everyone does, a sports bra that maybe kind of matches. I think I always bought black because I liked things that just like matched. And then really whatever shoes the shoe store had in my size. I wasn't super interested. I'll tell you, Island, so Styling by Island on the LTK app always does athleisure really well. And her, Sella Jane, they would both wear like sets that matched and that weren't black. And I was like, oh, maybe I should like switch to something else. And so, they first introduced me to a couple pair of shoes that I really loved. And then also to Varley, which now I truly live in Varley and actually watch this space because you might hear a little bit more about Varley coming soon. But I have a whole section in my closet that is those products, and I can work out in them. I can go pick up the kids at school. Candidly, I can go to dinner. Like they're a really cute look. I love their double soft collection. That's probably where I'm like truly focused. I love to lift weights. I love to walk. I'm not yet a big runner. And so Varley actually allows me to do all of that and in an outfit that maybe I've worn all day on my, my meetings on the computer, for example, because I always have these like super cute necklines.
Yeah, your LTK always has the best picks, and I favorite them and get the price drop alert. And those shoes that you shared recently, the On Clouds, they sold out in minutes. So thank God I had the alert on.
I really do like to match my shoes to my outfit. So kind of each season I've picked a colorway, and on Varley there's like an oatmeal type colorway. I forgot what they call it. Ivory marl, I think is what they call it. And so I have shoes that go back with that. And then I kind of stepped out of the box a little bit for winter, and that chocolate was really popular, but then I couldn't wear my shoes that went back with the ivory marl. So I got a new pair of On Clouds that you're referencing. I hope they restock them because they're great shoes, but they looked really nice back with the chocolate. I just think having the full look makes it to where you can actually wear it in public versus just a workout outfit that, drops before you get the shower.
Definitely. Okay. I'm going to close my laptop because I want to get really personal and talk about a topic you love and something that's just hot in the media right now. So Google AI overviews, how that impacts creators, especially our blog forward creators and just this industry in general. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think about this update and how it's going to potentially impact not just creators, but the internet as we know it?
So I want to take us back for just a second to talk about some of the consumer trends that we've seen and then why we've built what we have built. So we launched in 2011. I had a blog, all my friends had blogs. We used Facebook and Twitter to drive traffic to our blogs. And then next Pinterest launched, and we used then Pinterest. We'd pin content from our blog to drive traffic back to our blog. And then by 2013, what was Facebook had acquired Instagram, and people started moving into apps. This was also around the same time that the Apple iPhone became more popular. A year before, I was on the BlackBerry, so were all my friends. We were BBM messaging each other. So you started to have this phone where the App Store was built in. Apps started to become popular, and Instagram was one of the very first apps that became popular. And for the very first time, consumers really had truly a smartphone, like beyond the BlackBerry. Like they had an internet-based phone. And with these apps, that's where they started to spend the majority of their time. So as a creator, I thought of it in a couple ways. One, I have this blog, but now I have Instagram. So I can expand into Instagram. And while I'm growing so quickly there, first of all, I'm getting all these new followers overnight. I'm getting instant feedback. Whereas on my blog, getting comments is like over days and months and years. Like it's not this active live experience. And we saw that as this new technology became available, people shifted and they started spending more time on their mobile device, that time that didn't even exist before. And so I remember very quickly, like 2013, we started to see that 30% of our creators' traffic to their websites was coming from a mobile device. Alarm bells were going off in my mind because I was like, these websites are such a poor experience when you go on a phone, which means you're now competing as a website on a phone versus an app-based experience. There just is no comparison. And I was like, unless we come up with something that's app-based, because that's again where it's all headed, our creators are going to be left behind. This will be the MySpace generation. This will be the blog generation. It'll be the same thing. So we did a couple things. One, We actually hired a team of engineers and for free moved all of our creators' sites one by one to be mobile responsive, which now would be obvious for everyone. At the time, no one had heard of it. No one knew it, but we were like, we will do this for you because it's that important to your business. And then we started building an app because we realized this is how consumers will behave in the future. We're seeing increased time there. People love the serotonin hits of the quick feedback and then talking back and forth. So we started building the LTK app. I go through that piece of the history because I don't hate blogs. I have no emotion about blogs. I actually was a blogger. What I have emotion about is going to not shooting, what we call shooting behind the target, right? If a ship is starting to sink, you better be getting to the one that's racing ahead faster, right? And so it's not about, my husband will often mention, he's like, it's not about a faster horse. It's like the car is now invented. And so people think that I'm, taking some sort of hard stance against their blog. If you have a blog, what I have always said and what I will say again, so please listen to the whole conversation, not just the soundbite. If you have a blog and it makes you money, keep the blog. Of course, keep the blog. But what I have said is don't invest in it as if it's your growth channel. It's not a growth channel. And that's not just based on my opinion. That's based on LTK data. We see that now it's almost 100% of the creators who apply to LTK do not have a website. That doesn't mean the old ones didn't. The old ones did, and they maybe in some cases still do. New generation does not, which means consumers are not being trained now to be going to websites. We're not seeing new traffic to websites. We also see that our newer generation of creators, and by newer generation, I mean the last 5 to 10 years, they're not also going back and getting a website. And they're not doing it because it's just not the way consumers behave. And so when I talk about this in the context of Google AI, it's okay. Well, the reason that that's so important about this new efficiency from Google AI is that people used Google to get traffic to their website, right? SEO. You want to talk about things that people are searching so that they land on your website. And for some people, that's been their entire model. That's how they make money. So there's two things happening. One, there's going to be less SEO value because as the platform, Google, has answers for things, there is no more going to a website. You also have to remember that Google is an advertising platform. So if you are a website that needs traffic, they now have more opportunity for you to pay to advertise. So it's aligned with their business model. If you have a website and you require SEO, I would start thinking very quickly about other on-ramps to your website, or you let it ride out. So in our business, we talk about letting some fires burn. There are a lot of problems that we're trying to solve. There are problems of a ship that's sinking that we're less focused on solving. Instead, we're putting our calories and our money, if you will, our team's energy and effort and our resources into things that are shooting ahead of where the consumer is, so that when that reality exists, our creators are there. This is why we already see the vast majority of consumer sales today are happening on the LTK platform. They're not happening from social media, going out to a retailer site, or from a blog going to a reseller site, or even from Pinterest going, name your platform. We monetize newsletters, podcasts, blogs, social media profiles, also LTK. But the consumer journey on the LTK app is just so much more efficient that's resulting in a 4 times better conversion rate versus other channels. I won't go on and beat the horse, but it is a hot topic. I think some of my quotes I hate to be say taken out of context because I stand by exactly what I said, but you have to understand the whole story. This is not a war on blogs. This is just saying we all have to be totally emotionally honest, intellectually honest about where our opportunity set is. And if you have a blog, you want to retain the revenue. If you don't, you probably don't want to launch a blog because that's not where consumers are today.
Okay, let's shift gears to something super fun. It is LTK's 13th anniversary, which is absolutely incredible. We're all so grateful to be a part of the team, and LTK does a party better than anyone I've ever seen. And I know we're going to celebrate. Let's talk about the last 13 years. What really sticks out as either a memory or a learning or a lesson that you want to share?
So 13 years is a very long time. I feel like I could write an encyclopedia of books about all of the experiences and the learnings. Twice a year we bring our team in, our entire US team. We fly them all in and we're in one space. And when I pulled back the curtains to walk into the room where we were doing the event yesterday, it was a sea of hundreds of chairs. And each one of those chairs is not just a guest of the company. Those are all people who work at the company. Every seat was filled. The back was all their standing room only. And to think about how every person, what they're doing every day, the clients that they're working with, the ideas that they have, the effort that the energy that they're putting in, and the fact that we've really refined and have this very elegant and elevated team is how we are so confident in where we're heading and that we can do it. I'm so grateful for the people who've chosen to be here at LTK today. And I'm grateful for our industry, candidly, because I think of me as a creator and that there's 800 people behind me that do this work, quote, for free for me because they just want me to succeed and they only succeed when I do. And how incredible to have that.
How exciting. I know there are really big things ahead and we all just can't wait.
This year specifically, like the first half of the year has been insane. Like just wait for the transformation in the back half.
We'll be waiting. Can't wait. Thanks, Amber.
Thanks, Stephanie.
You can listen to More to Say on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday, and I'd love to hear from you. Share your comments and questions in the reviews section, or you can reach me at Amber Vinsbox on LTK, Instagram, or LinkedIn.